Welcome to the Mount Vernon School of Arts Summer Lecture Series hosted here in the Pennsylvania Chautauqua's Historic Hall of Philosophy. Thank everyone for being here tonight. And I want to thank Stinson Strout for his support of the lecture series this summer, along with Purpose One Visual Marketing, which is one of our corporate sponsors, to our summer program here at Mount Vernon School of Art, which we call the Intensive Program. A little bit about the school. We're a 7-week summer kind of training camp atmosphere where students really live, eat, and breathe painting all day, every day, in a very focused niche way, almost like when a foreign language major finally gets to study abroad for a semester and be totally immersed in something very specific. Which we focus on here is it's all about going outside and connecting with nature, learning about the nature and tradition of seeing and painting and how all those things fold in on each other. You know, another big founding principle of the school, which I'm super proud of, I wouldn't want to do this, the equity principles that we've maintained since our founding year. The way that donors and fans of the school really get behind our scholarship system. Another way that the school prides itself in the way that it connects with the community, not only here in Mount Gretna through these lectures that we share in the Hall of Philosophy, but also now the greater community of Mount Gretna School of Art tunes into our Zoom lectures online or sees our shows. Yeah, so we're almost at the end of finished week 4. And coming up this Sunday is our student show, when we fill this room with artwork, and it's a special chance to congratulate students on the work they've done for the summer. Now I'm going to introduce Michael Amendolara. He's going to talk about his own work and the work of influences today, I'm sure. And then, you know, I learned from Ro and all these people encouraged me to bring it on. I'm really happy you're here. He's going to be here for 2 or 3 days, giving this lecture, and then doing crits with the students for the next 2 days. Michael went to IU, Bloomington, where he learned about Leland Bell's work through a show there, and then really zoomed in on that, and then furthered his studies in New York City at the New York Studio School, where he did get a chance to study with Leland and Bretton Campbell and Nicholas Corona, and also got his MFA degree at Parsons. He's had a solo show recently at the Sweet Lorraine Gallery in Red Hook, Brooklyn, and an upcoming 2-person show in Brooklyn at Dredger's Boathouse with Amy Weil. All right, Michael, thank you. Come on up.
Can you all hear in the back? And it's my intention to describe to you what I think is the difference between looking at light and basing paintings on a real experience, which is a subtle kind of thing that I hope to describe to you. And I'm going to start with an argument that I'm having with Picasso. He's very upset about it as well. You know, Picasso was very, quote him, he said, "Don't talk to me about Bonnard, that's not painting what he does. Painting isn't a question of sensibility, it's a question of seizing power, taking over from nature and not expecting her to supply you with information and good advice." In a way, it's right, but it still makes me angry. He was very intolerant, and one time at a dinner party, he made his host take a Bonnard painting down from the wall so that he could enjoy the dinner. And, I have been influenced by him quite a lot, and I think it may be similar to having an alcoholic parent. But he's obviously a great genius, and probably the greatest genius of his century. But now I would like to start with, this is a Corot painting. I'm going to show you Corot's, Henry Rousseau, Henry Matisse, and then I'm going to show you my work and then some work of Peter's of mine. So this is an early Corot painting, and it's north of Paris where he went to school, and he had just broken free of his parents' desire to go into the textile business, and they gave him the money to proceed. And it's fairly standard stuff. I mean, it's very good. He was an immensely talented man. And so it's kind of standard stuff, and I can elaborate a bit. If you look at the steeple on the horizon, be very careful to make that completely vertical and aware that that vertical is parallel to every vertical that exists. And that allows him to back up from his canvas and expand his plane of vision. And when you see that, you start to realize that everything is organized around that being the principal spot that doesn't move. If you're standing in front of a row of pillars and move your head, you see how everything moves behind those pillars. And that has to stop in order for a painting to exist. And this is traditionally a way of solving that problem. So I want to also quote him on a couple of things. He said, the most important thing to study are shape and tonal values. These two things are the only serious points of any study of art. Color and execution add charm to a work. By execution, he means everything that you touch. And he was criticized even in his own day for the fact that his palette is somewhat limited. Of course, Cezanne was very young at this time, but if you compare to Cezanne, someone who had 28 colors on his palette at any given time, this is a much different order. And then he also said, if you want to do a study or a picture, first try out the shape in your head. Once you've tried it out in all sorts of ways, then move on to the value. Look for them in blocks. Be conscientious. And that really struck me because even in this early painting of his, it's just, this painting is 8 by 13 inches. So you're looking at it a little bit larger than it actually is. But you can see where all the dark lines of these trees, and he's like laying out the contours of the landscape using that vertical in the back. And you can see when you start to think about it, that they are laid out in blocks. You can see on the bottom row of trees, about the middle of a rectangular block that comes down and meets gravity. Or you can look at a block right below the steeple, you see the hill that is right below the steeple after the lines of trees, that diagonal that dips down on the left side. Always with a very fluid paint, especially at this stage of his career. Paint was very fluid and rapidly changing from one tone, one color to the next. For example, in this block of colors on to the left here, you see at the bottom a very blonde collection of tones, as opposed to the blue collection of tones in the River Seine, which is directly above it, and the cloud above that. Now, he always said that he started with the darkest values and moved forward, and he actually wanted to count them, so that if he had 20 tones, he knew, he was on his way somewhere. But he contradict that by saying that the tonality of any good landscape comes from the sky. And I think it's important to note. I'm going to tell you this rather elaborately because it serves my inner nerd. And it also is a convenient way for me to try to express my thoughts about seeing nature. In the academy, we tend to think of Impressionism as the good guys and They were like the superheroes conquering those, stifled academicians. And they burst on the scene like Athena springing from the head of Zeus, with this impressionism. But that's not actually how it happened. People were talking about impressions 40 years before Impressionism. Reality is somewhat like this. This person walks in the room and 10 people see that person. 10 people have a different idea of what that person's like. But not one of those persons is going to see it dark, right? You're going to see a person, okay? And it's just the same when we're in the sensible world. I mean, we don't try to walk through walls. We use the doors, right? So there's nature impinges upon our senses. In the academy, it was very clearly taught that those impingements had a range of values. And we think of values being the same as tone, but value meant a very specific thing. For example, the value of a lemon was considered more than the value of an orange because it was lighter. But going back to those people who all see everything differently, if you're standing in front of nature, and this is what its range of values was called the effect. And each person brought to that effect their own impression. And you can imagine two people painting the same thing, and one chooses as his or her darkest dark, a lighter tone than the other. That affects every decision that person makes in that painting. And that is, in a way, it describes what the impression of an effect is. And so I'm going to move on from here. Delacroix and Corot were friends. They were friendly enough that Delacroix visited Corot, and he was having trouble with something that he was working on with the painting the trees. And Corot said to him, just take what comes more easily. And Delacroix really got off on that remark. But Delacroix, in a way, I mean, much more the figure painter than Corot. At one point in his journals, he said that the corners determine the contours. And that's a very almost Albertian description, stemming from the Renaissance. Leon Battista Alberti codified what Renaissance painters were doing with perspective, how they got their piazzas to, vanish into nowhere and all of that. Corot was different. He said, start with shapes. Once you have the shapes, then go to the values. That's a very different kind of statement. The first statement about the contours is like the description of the contained and the container at the same time. It's zeroing in on, the contours of the form in that way. But just composing, just dividing the surface into shapes, it's a very different idea. I think it makes him quite unique in the history of the period. Again, you can see that he is starting with his vertical, and anytime I have to start painting with greens, I just feel like packing up and going home. He really kind of, it's a simple thing. Again, his painting's about 8 inches high. And he would do these, he did many, many of them. He would do them all summer, and then in the winter, he would take these into the studio, and he would work them up, so to speak. And he was always trying to preserve his first impression of, what was in front of him. The Academy actually had, they had exercises where they would make their students paint as quickly as possible so that they would learn how to execute things. And the results were very impressionistic, but they didn't consider those things to be finished works of art. So, I mean, in the sense of this history, this critic whose name I can't remember, and walked into Solana, the Fusays, and said, but this is impressionism. He was right. And the Impressionists knew he was right. The difference was he didn't like it and they did. Corot was very methodic about what he did. And like I said, he wanted to preserve, he wanted to know in advance where he was headed. And when I look at these, probably something that fit into his pocket, and he did thousands and thousands of these things. And I look at these shapes of, anachronistically, they remind me of art, but they, these shapes occupying space on the page seem to me to be indicating a washy kind of paint, not necessarily that transparent, but loose enough that he could really kind of brush it in very freely. These are some of the same. And if you go to the Louvre's website, you can pull up literally thousands of these. It's pretty remarkable. So you can see what I mean about the shapes and how he got the consistency of the paint to be fluid enough that he could, like he told Delacroix, just let it come, let it be what it's going to be, just let it flow. Somewhat limited palette, and it serves him very well because I don't think you're going to get the same kind of fluidity or the kind of nuance. Like you can see about a quarter of the way down in the sky, there's this little spot here that's the brightest blue, and above it you have a powdery blue. Down below, it kind of molds it into a grayer blue. And, these areas that he probably mapped out in advance in his mind of the trees and has very similar kind of nuance going on. This, again, a very, very limited palette. The first person that we know of writing about materials is Pliny the Greek, and he said that there were only 4 true colors: black, white, red, and yellow. From those, you can really do quite a lot. And in this, the only red that I see is, the little pink at the horizon. And he just brings so much out of it. And it's so clear. His intentions are so clear. This is what I want. I'm into these shapes. I'm into these tones. And that's the thing that's important to me. And yeah, if you add more color or you execute with a touch that's deft or charming, it adds to the work. This painting is 4 inches high. This painting is net, and again, you can actually see it's very clear how he's constantly comparing and constantly shifting from one tone to the next. Like the way that he gets this color in the foreground, like on the edge of this ravine or ditch, whatever it is, on the left side, and then he flips over to that very cool green, and it just lays back so nicely. And then you headed back towards the horizon, you see how he darkens that green. It's constantly shifting. And then over here, how he marks out the turn of that hill with just the slightest flick of the wrist. The nuances are so close, and yet they're so effective. To be able to take that green that's on the bottom right side and skip to the blue of that hill, directly above it, and then the paler blue off into the distance, and that's what he's after. It's the Duran, and I wish to God I could show you the Durans that I love the most. You can't even see them online. The critics have decided that they're not really worthy of being shown, and so they are not. I've been lucky to see some of them in my lifetime. But it's just, to me, I'm talking about this because it's kind of like, I'm a quick change artist. I can move from a ochre sandy white to that blue fan that builds it, quicker than quick as you please. And this, again, back to Thoreau, you know, I like Jackson Pollock, you know, as much as the next person, but they give you that clear-eyed genius in front of it. What kind of rhythm do you have to have built up to make something like this? Just nails those contours. I mean, they're just pressing against the center of the earth. And then just, you know, marching those trees across it. This is very large painting for Corot. This is 40 inches across. And having, you know, gone through this technique of painting all summer outside and bringing things in and working these things up in the winter. And he showed this in the salons in the 1860s, I think, 64, 67, was immediately purchased by the government. But what just knocks me out is, for example, the mirror image of these whites, like you see the trees on the far bank, and there's that little patch of white above it, and then you see its mirror image below. And what a subtle difference there is between those two. Then all of a sudden you think, you know, you come to the left side over here, it's a different light again, and it just comes out and becomes very cool, almost green towards the middle, and like a powdery, almost like a lavender pearl at the top. Again, the execution. I mean, how do you make all these like little butterfly moves on there and not end up with something that looks like it belongs in a Marriott hotel? That's, of course, the same. And the color is just what he needs, and no more than he needs. Baltus made figures like this, reaching into a tree numerous times. And, you know, we have these people who are heroes, and I look back at these things by Corot, and I'm inclined to agree with Monet. I mean, he was just better than us all. So this is Henry Rousseau, and again, I can't show you the one that I would like because you can't see them anywhere. But this is something that he painted from nature, and he had a very similar technique where he would go out into nature and he would paint these wonderful things. And they're so moody, and at some point in his life, he was painting these that are so close to there being no light in the sky whatsoever, and they're so able. It's very, very difficult when you get into that very deep range to try to, you know, maintain a sense of where you are and what you want. So if you can focus on this diagonal here and see what he made of this painting. See that diagonal? How he brings this figure here in the pathway. You know, he brings it down, he broadens this whole thing out. And here's where I have something to ask. I mean, what is painting from nature? What is observation? If he goes back to his studio, he has a better sense of what he felt when he's in his studio. Is that painting from nature, or is he working something up in a way that people don't think? They think that, you know, plein air is you're out, you know. But look, I mean, you all have firsthand knowledge. You know, when you're out in the landscape, it's rough. You know, you have bugs crawling under the brim of your hat, and, you know, you're sweating bullets, and the wind is blowing your canvas, you know, down the hill or whatever. Now, neither of these sketches have I seen. The ones that I have seen and love more than these, I have to say, I wish I could show you. But this is a sketch for a painting that is now in the Phillips. And it is, again, he's such an able guy. You know, he clears up his sky. Now, I don't know how close these are. I'm only going by the slides that I was able to. Now, this painting is in the Phillips. I've seen it, and this is a very, very clear representation of what he was actually doing. And then this Matisse, when I saw this painting in Washington, D.C., I couldn't get over it. This is the Nice period painting. It was a 20-year period of his life that, again, that the critics have decided that this is the least interesting period of Matisse. For my preference, it's actually the most interesting. Again, you think about the sky being the determinant of tonality in a picture. And the sky, the brightest part of the sky is under that big tree on the right side, or between the tree and the mountain. And then you can see how it modulates as it comes to the top of the sky, and how it joins with the white of these irises. It just really knocked me out. I feel like you can feel those petals falling forward. And I don't hear people talking about execution. I hear people talking about color, how color moves, or drawing, how you maintain a sense of organization in drawing. But look at the shape of those brushstrokes and the leaves of those irises, how they end in a point. It's pretty remarkable. I have to bring up Courbet in relation to this painting because the relief is so stunning. And there is this impression of an effect. And Courbet was one who's had such a startling relief that even Delacroix, who did not really care for his paintings too much, had to say, well, okay, that's pretty remarkable stuff. And that's how I feel about this painting, that it's really, like Brock said, it's not enough to show somebody, you have to make them touch it. And I really get that sense with it. And there's not the oddest nuances in this painting, in between these red bushes, that just invite these little colors that just set down on the ground, and give you the sense of gravity that you need. Also, again, the tonality coming from the sky, how aware he is of that, and especially in the center of the painting, because there's something about the center of a painting that speaks to the tonality. And if you don't get that right the first time around, and you're really going for it, you're going to have to repaint that because it all has to make sense from the center out. Love, love, love. I mean, just go ahead, Matisse, and just redefine for me what painting is. I mean, just the simplest means, what do you think he has? And he would say, yeah, I've got 5 colors and 6 lines. That's enough for me, This is one of the most stunning paintings I can think of in terms of its audacity. Just like I say, really redefining what it is to be a landscape painter and doing it and making it. This, again, this is the last piece that I'm showing, and it reminds me so much of the Corot, and I think a very, very similar mindset to the Corot, that yes, I have these simple things on my palette, and I'm just going to give you my impression of that effect, and I'm going to give it to you with my heart and soul. Now I'm going to do something really nasty to myself, and that's how I'm going to start showing my own work after seeing those. But I decided that I would be holding back if I didn't show you who I was, and so I didn't originally plan to show you my work, but anyway, here it goes. This is a landscape in Ohio looking towards Pennsylvania, and if I could see another 10 miles, I'd be in Pennsylvania. So this was done on a wood panel, and I covered the wood panel with cheesecloth and cemented that down with polyurethane to give me that graininess. And I discovered for the first time, to my utter delight, just how opaque Mars yellow is and what you can do with that. This is one of my most recent paintings, and I worked on this painting over a period of 3 years, very small. And I knew I had the tonality that I wanted in the sky, and I kept going after this and wiping it out and wiping it out. And then one day I just felt like, okay, today's the day. And so, for better or worse, was the day I finished it. Looking back on it, I had no idea what those colors are. The way that I work, I had many paintings going, maybe 12 paintings going at the same time, and out and wet at the same time. And sometimes I'll make a color and I like that color and say, well, how will it look if I put it on this scene? This painting was purchased by one of your donors. I love the sky. I love what happened in the sky. And I don't have to take credit for that. I mean, the paint did it. And I felt lucky to be able to follow through and to walk out with something. Because I always feel like I'm never going to make another painting. This I call the cherry orchard, because I think there's something a little disquieting about it. The Cherry Orchard is a play by Anton Chekhov, where people they think, oh, the cherry orchard will always be here, and it just doesn't, maybe play out that way. At the time, I had 19 paintings. I started rowing, and I used to paint under the Brooklyn Bridge a lot until it got dangerous, and I had to stop doing that. And I would often be coming home down the Hudson River, right on the shore at dusk, and I saw something like this, and I made this painting. This again, the boats. The Duran that I wish I could show you the most is in paint outside of Paris, this place that was an abandoned boatyard. And he did paintings that I could not possibly describe to you. And I wish I could show you even something close. I was so lucky to see. And this is kind of a homage. And this is the dock at my cousin's boathouse, or his lake house. And this, I've always been very interested in the motifs of it, like 1909, 1910, with these square formats. One is like an infant stature, and this woman is just sort of collapsing into the ground, and this man is reaching after her in sort of gesture as he wishes to save her or something. It's just a remarkable painting. And I've always loved the simplicity of it. This painting started out as a seascape. Again, I worked on this painting for probably 5 years, and it ended up a painting about Eric Burden and animals spill the wine. You know the song. Old people in the audience, you know what I mean. So I was really into the poet Sappho when I painted this, and she's a Greek poet. I think the loveliest thing that she ever said about her own death was that the fairest thing I leave behind is the sunshine. She was a lesbian, and I think she lived on the island of Lesbos, where the name comes from. And I wanted this woman to express both strength and vulnerability. When my son saw this, he was, Dad, the leg that's raised up. I mean, it doesn't work. I'm not changing this. I've always loved, since the first time I saw Lucas Frank, I was just in rapture over the guy's ability to paint the nude. He's did hundreds of these refining nudes. I must have covered this surface about 20 times. And what I would do is I would paint it, and if I wasn't happy with it, I would give it sort of an interlayer that kind of like a lacy, gauzy kind of thing, so I could still see what was underneath as a kind of underpainting, and then I would repaint the whole thing. I did a series of these, and this one was the most successful. This is called In the Cabana. That's kind of a goof off on the other painting, the other reclining nude that I showed you. It's meant as a joke, and it's also meant as a homage to Ron Green. This is my self-portrait as well. I decided on the colors in advance. I mean, his painting was very rembrandt-like, and I wasn't going to attempt that. This was right around the same time, kind of similar feeling. This painting, nobody wants this on their wall. But for me, it was a kind of victory because I always felt that Klein was right, that the four colors, black, white, red, yellow, it's enough. And Titian said even black, white, and red is enough. And he painted a great crucifix towards the end of his life that is just utterly simple and just knocked across the room. But this is kind of a death mask self-portrait I painted during the pandemic. So I always wanted to be able to model the forms violently, in a sense. And I think I was successful in that, and I don't care if ever done anybody's wall. This is a digital print, and someone just said about the male gaze, and I think she really does have a good attitude. When I was a little kid, my father's brothers had a bar, and at Christmas time they would hang the Santa Claus that had 3D eyes, and it would follow you around the room, and we were mesmerized as children. When I did this painting, my stepson called me and he said, "Did you make this painting from people that you know?" And I said, "No." And I thought, "Damn, it's it." But I've always been particularly attracted to the things that happened in the 50s. Very influenced by a ceramist from the 50s named Gamboni. And I always wanted to go to a drive-in movie, and I would be, they used to have all these graphics at the beginning of the movie, and I like that better than the movie. And this, I worked very diligently on this. It was the last in a long line of what I consider to be failures of my intention. I wanted to bring the sky into this woman's dress and have all those series of blues operate. And I worked to some degree, but I was so disappointed in the look on her face. And I was up to my eyeballs in this thing. And I was so angry that I destroyed it. I was pretty upset about it. And I decided, what am I doing with these figure paintings that are sort of like hearkening to the past? I mean, what next? I'm going to put on a top hat and ask my wife to wear a bustle. I want the tradition to live, and I want it to be also, I want to live in my own century, in my own time, and speak to my own people. And I don't think that this really, I don't think it really comes off. So I decided, enough. I'm a homegrown baby. I've never been able to decide whether I want to be an abstract painter or a figurative painter, and I've always done both. And so I started this series of abstractions. This one's called Rockabye Baby. And I just wanted to feel like, what can color do if it doesn't have to worry about being a nose or a leg, or let's see what these things can do. This is has a title from a banned book. Oh yeah, the Bible, recently banned in Idaho or Iowa. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. Anyway, I call this a house divided, and I got a fair amount of pushback online saying it's a nice painting. Why do you want to name it that? I said, well, Because our country's on the verge of falling apart, that's why. And, I know that's not the narrative, but, I still want to express those things. I'm very happy with this painting. I had been covering this surface for years before I decided to go, wholeheartedly into this direction. And again, my homage to Juan Breed. It's like called paper dragon, very small, and the blooming on those some of those patches is intentional. And I was impressed with them with the things that remain flat and cohesive. This my stepson has this painting. It's called Frank Gehry's Dog, and Frank Gehry was designing a home for himself. He bought a home that he really liked, and he wanted to put an addition on it. And no matter what he did, it always seemed to him like he was sticking something on it that didn't belong. So what he did was he put the addition like running a ramrod right through the existing house. And I was thinking about that. It kind of looked like a dog. I said, you know what? It's Frank Gehry. Okay. And then my wife, when she saw this, she said, well, you have to name this 5 o'clock shadow. Okay. That's a title. But I conceived of it as an abstract landscape. It's got a green, it's got the sky. But I'm really just trying to get the elements to be moving and balanced and stable at the same time. This one is called Pure Nonsense because it doesn't relate to anything in a sensible world. And a very unusual tactic for me is plan this painting out from beginning to end before I put anything down. This painting is 5 feet across, and I really felt like I was starting to get somewhere with taking these colors into very unusual places. And again, to try to get them to be moving and stable at the same time. And none of the reds is the same. They're all, they all have their little peculiarities. I didn't compare these things on the canvas at all. And I didn't try to, I'm going to make this color and then, make it and test it and stuff like that. I just laid the pigments out the way that they felt to me. And I said, I'm just going to do this and just put them down. And again, I was pleased with the result because I was having fun. Okay, I wasn't making a painting that I wanted to destroy, And I continue to work in an abstract way. I am still working on landscape paintings, none of which I feel like I want to show. And this is Camilla. It's those of you who saw Rose, her favorite donkey that passed away. And I mean, come on, bro, that is just too much. I'm just in love with that. Rose did this painting in Paris, and she showed it to you. She didn't show you this. I don't know why. I think it's kind of a knockout. I think it's kind of an outlier for her, very unusual piece of work. I'm going to go quickly through these recipes. This is Bell. Think again about the sky being this, what sets the tonality of the painting and what happens in the center of the painting to establish tonality. Look how she kept the bare canvas there because she needed it there. This is a similar view, similar direction, with obviously winter and love the whites. Whites in the sky, whites in the ground. This is Carlos Velazquez, and he lives in Mexico. I recently moved to Mexico on a hike, and came into contact with Carlos again after many, many years. And I was just, that really speaks of authenticity to me. It really is. this again, I mean, his abstraction with the landscape, very clearly a landscape, but also in a sense not a landscape, and just balancing those hues. This is the view from his roof. And if you think, well, gee, that could never be, that couldn't be, this is the view from my roof. This is Al Fresh. And Al passed away. I think he was 100 years old when he passed away. And sometimes he would say, look, I'm not going to mix a color that I can buy. And I just think and he's just so free to be himself. This is one of the later things that he did. Again, I have to talk about what is painting from nature, because I think it's so important that he is able to be himself and to express things about nature that seem implausible. Again, I'm going to be nasty to someone else, and that's Andrew Wyatt. I mean, think about that girl in the field. I mean, how many guys got some skill? Doesn't move me at all. I mean, at all. Never has, never will. And what versatility. This is Al too. This is Al Fresh too. And I think this is painted in New Mexico. And he's really taking off on his love affair in this painting. And this is a very late painting by Al, like one of the last paintings. And I went to his memorial, and they asked Stanley Lewis to talk about his painting. And he was just speechless. Think about it. Stanley Lewis, speechless. But it's just something else. This is Steffi Frank. Long time friend. I've known Steffi for 45 years, and this was recently exhibited at the Bowery Gallery, and her range of hues makes me a little jealous. And here we go again with Steffi and her ability to make me jealous of her ability to color. And she worked on I know she worked on the stain for years. This is a painter that I love, and he did these abstract landscapes, and she started putting these wires running across them, and so then they became clotheslines, and so this is her dress blowing in the wind, and she is currently showing a very large series of these clothes on clotheslines blowing in the wind called They Drunk, They Can Fly. So here's, I love the dress, the second one from the left. I just love it. Again, she's so free, so lovely. Actually, she's so lovely. I asked her to marry me, and we got married in April. Here we are, happy couple in our studio, which we are giving up, and it happens to all of us who are we're living in New York, or we live in New York, or you get a studio and just get your act together, so to speak. You know where everything is, and you know how you're working, and the rent goes up beyond your reach. If you can find a place to call home, and like you can really, if you can own it, it's such a good move. This is the last slide. This is a painting of mine. I'm saying goodbye, and it's kind of my desire to escape reality. I read the news today. Oh boy, I want to go somewhere. I want to escape, and I didn't want to spend like a whole lot of time making these figures. I don't care. Her products or not, and I just don't care. I mean, to me, this was it was one of my favorite things when I did it, and I still like it. And with that, I say that's the end of That's all about it.
Thank you, Michael. Earlier,
Can you comment on execution in regards to secure, please? Would you like to speak to that in your opinion on execution?
Yeah, I mean, execution as a term, and if you go back to either French painting in the 19th century is very instructive. It is the most cohesive set of terms that we have regarding the past, and even going back beyond the 19th century to the Renaissance, because a lot of those things were gleaned from the Renaissance, which was the other, at least in the Western world, the academic storehouse of terms, ideas, of ways of talking about this language. I can give you examples of execution. In the Impressionists, for example, they eliminated the demitones, the half tones, and they just painted straightforward colors. In a way, they were Delacroix would say that he proceeded with the half tone. And what I mean by that, if you take all the nuances in an object that is a solid color object, and it has all of its nuances, if you were able to melt them into a bowl and mix that bowl, what would that color be? That to me is a half tone. And then in Delacroix's case, then he would add his lights and darks, not to the pleasure of the academicians who would painstakingly, Annie would say, don't finish it until it's finished. You have those contours down and you know where those tones are going, and then you're going to blend them together so that you have a form that is magnificently described. That's one aspect of execution. Also, talking about the academy, they have these exercises where they would encourage their students to paint as quickly as possible to learn how to execute broad strokes without faltering. So then they would move from those large aspects to the smaller aspects in what the academy would consider a finished work. There was a famous academician who told Delacroix, and he relates in his journal that Horace Vernet says that you execute a painting when you have hold of it. It's hard to describe that, but or he told his assistant, a man named Andreo, and he was up on a ladder, and Delacroix made a note to himself and said, when the figure starts to turn, coach him, because there's a point at which, in a sense, you can see the scale. And at that point, it's like the painting plays out inevitably. Like you no longer have to make a decision. It's there, and you're just kind of like there for the ride. And it has everything to do with touch. And that's why I say, when I hear people talk about the touch, Delacroix was very concerned with that, and at first he was in this contour thing, and then after that, he said, no, I don't care. The contours can come last. I don't care. I don't know if that answers your question.
Thank you, Michael.
You're welcome.